Good morning, lovelies. Is evil God's will? Let's talk about it. Jesus, coffee. So, does God allow evil? Is it His will? Well, let's talk about it. As I read through a devotional, in the middle of my Bible, there's a devotional section. So I was reading through there this morning, and there was a good question that somebody asks, and then they kind of talk through, they take the biblical and make it practical. So is every little thing that happens to anyone God's will? I took a job I was sure was God's will and got laid off 6 months later. Did God want me to get laid off? Isn't His will for us supposed to be good? Good questions in there. So, is every little thing that happens to us God's will? No, not always. And why do I say that? Why do I say no, it's not? Well, because we're not puppets. We have free will. If we didn't have free will, we'd be puppets. We'd be big marionettes. But we're not. We have free will. We have the ability to move around, and we have the ability to think. And when God plops something into our head and we're like, hey, maybe I should go do that. Or, nah, I shouldn't do that. Somebody else should go do that. Are you missing an opportunity there to obey God and follow His will? Maybe. Maybe you are, maybe you aren't. When we get an idea, when we get a thought, and we're like, hey, maybe somebody should do something about that. Well, go look in a mirror and say that, because if God put that thought in your head, He put that thought in your head for a reason. Probably because you're gifted and skilled and knowledgeable to know how to do that. Good morning, Janice. But are you going to do that? So, and we talk about, does every little thing that happens. Let's talk about some evil that can happen to us. Plane crash. Rape, murder. School shootings. I mean, just as an example. Or, as Janice has her profile picture, police officers in Bristol were shot and killed. Was that God's will? No. I mean, may it have been God's will that it was time for those police officers to come home? Yeah, that may very well have been. And was it His will to bring them home that way? Well, however He brings them home, He brings them home. But here's the thing we shouldn't miss in this. When evil happens, there's a lesson to be learned. When bad things happen to us, there's a lesson to be learned. What's that lesson? Well, one, how do we respond? How do we respond to a situation like that? Let me give you an example, a personal example. So I was a sales manager for Florida Blue and was running 2 different teams. A new leadership team had come on, and, well, they began to come down. And I saw attacks coming from all directions. And it felt like I was in the middle of a war. Just attacks coming and coming and coming. Leading to a demotion. Right before, so it was about 2 years ago, because it was right before Lee and I got married. What do we do with that, right? all of a sudden I'm back to being an agent and I take a demotion. How do we respond to that? How did I respond to that? Was I upset? Was I angry at first? Oh, I was upset. But did I turn around and go off on leadership and start bad-mouthing leadership and start... I was a little upset at first. I'm not going to say I wasn't righteously angry. I was. But the response to that is God looks for us to trust him in the heart. You know, every good and perfect thing comes from above. So now, so I saw two things out of that. My response to that was, God, I'm going to trust you in this. I'm going to trust you. And two things came out of that. One, I now get to share the gospel with more people. Janice will tell you, I'm not afraid of talking about Jesus on the phone with my clients. Not afraid to. Nope. And I get told and talked to all the time, you shouldn't talk about religion while you're on the phone with clients. They might get offended. Yeah, they might get offended. But they might add me to Facebook and they might hear messages. They might be there for a reason. I might be there for a reason. Everything that happens for a reason. Whether it's good, bad, everything happens for a reason. But ultimately it comes down to, as I was with you, ultimately it comes down to how we respond to a situation. So when the hard comes up, like taking a demotion at work, how do we respond to that? Do we trust God in that situation? Or do we just get mad? So the two things he showed me that day was, one, I get to share the gospel with more people. Two, I get to experience my first year of being married to my beautiful bride without being stressed. And I get to punch a clock doing it. Because I'm not subject to long, endless hours and these ridiculous expectations. It's, you go in at this time, you get off at this time. That's the time you work. The rest of the time, you go through your marriage. And voila. Here in about 3 weeks, we'll be celebrating our second anniversary. Things happen for a reason. It comes down to how do we respond and how do we react to those situations. Do we get mad at God for them? Or do we say, God, I'm going to trust you in this and I'm going to let you guide me through this? That's the end of the day. That's the core of what happens is. Every situation that we endure, every situation that we face, everything is a what would Jesus do moment. What would Jesus do? And how do I respond to that? And it's a growth opportunity. And every time we do what we should do, it's a growth opportunity. And we get to grow closer to God. And we get to grow and be more like Christ. Every time we miss, well, we're going to face another one. But, hey, every opportunity is another opportunity to grow. So when you see things happen and you didn't quite respond the right way, and something comes again and you start to feel like, what is going on? Why is all of this happening? Well, guys, the first man and the first woman sinned. The result of that sin and the result of that was sin nature. It's inside all of us. We do the same thing. We sin. We're not perfect. Newsflash, you're not perfect. I'm not perfect. I'm so far from perfect. It's ridiculous. But every single moment, every single situation that comes, stop and take a breath and ask, what would Jesus do? Somebody cusses at you. Don't turn around and cuss them right back. Tell them thank you. What did Jesus say in the Sermon on the Mount? What did he say? Love your enemies. If they slap you in the face, offer the other cheek. If they slap you in one cheek, offer them the other. Love your enemies. Respond to the hard. Respond to any situation in a Christ-like way. As Christ-like as you can. As Christ-like as you know. And the more you know, the more you grow. It's really what it comes down to. The more you know, the more time you spend with your nose in this thing, the more you grow. The more you get to know him, and the more you understand what he's like, so that when you hit those moments, you know how to respond. So, we'll be back tomorrow with whatever Dad wants to talk about. I love you guys. I know he loves you. Go get victory in Jesus, in a new life. Stop walking around away from him. Go be in him. Love you guys. We'll be back tomorrow.